let me introduce you to our esteemed guests. As I said, first we have Nadwa al-Dawsari, who is a veteran researcher, conflict analyst, and policy advisor with 20 years of field experience in Yemen and the broader Middle East. Currently, she serves as an associate fellow at the Middle East Institute, a fellow at the Center of Armed Groups, and is part of the 2025 IWI Fellows cohort. Nadwa's research focuses on conflict in Yemen, drawing connections to broader geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East. She examines the impact of US foreign policy, internationally led peace efforts, counterterrorism, and aid on stability and security amid the rise of non-state armed actors and the evolving proxy warfare landscape in the region. Nadwa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And second, we have Guled Ahmed, who has extensive knowledge and experience in geopolitics and geoeconomic matters related to the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea, and sub-Saharan countries. His experience lies in areas like state and nation building, money laundering and terrorist financing, energy development, climate change and climate security, and transboundary water issues. Guled, a warm welcome to you as well.
Thanks, Belden.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you both for being with us today. Let's get started. I have plenty of questions, but let me sort of start setting the scene. On the 15th of March this year, the US launched intense airstrikes against the Houthis with the goal of restoring the freedom of navigation and diminishing their ability to attack ships. Since they started striking ships in the Red Sea, the Houthis have carried over 175 attacks against US Navy ships and other 145 against commercial vessels. The implications have been wide-ranging and have posed, I think, tough questions about deterrence and sort of countering measures. So let's start with the basics. Nadwa, who are the Houthis?
The Houthis are a Zaidi Shia rebels. They who emerged in the remote mountains of North Yemen in Sada. And they fought the government 6 wars between 2004 and 2010. And in 2014, with the help of the former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, they managed to seize the capital city of Sana'a and then expand throughout the country. The Houthis they believe in a divine right to rule for descendants of Prophet Muhammad. They are an extension of the Zaidi Imamate. The Zaidi Imamate was a theocracy that ruled Yemen, parts or sometimes all Yemen, for hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years, until it was overthrown in 1962. That's when we established the republic and abolished the Imamate system. So the Houthis seek to revive the Imamate. But also the Houthis are a member of Iran's axis of resistance, and they are inspired by the Iranian Revolution. So they brought that mix to Yemen. And with Iran's support, the Houthis managed to, but also with Iran's support, the Houthis became more than just a local Zaidi group. They became a transnational group with ambition to expand in the region and eventually globally.
Okay, so I appreciate the difficulty of summarizing sort of decades of conflict in a few minutes, but I think our audience is keen to know more. At least I know I am. So, as a Shiite extremist militant organizations, what are the ideological foundations that underpin the structure, function, and strategic outlook of the Houthis? And then I'll tag another question in here. How has ideology shaped decision-making in the organization since its inception? Nadwa.
Yes. So, I mean, the Houthis are, for the outside observer, they are an anti-imperialism, anti-West, anti-Semitic organization. And they share that with a lot of groups in the West. But their ideology is actually rooted in their religious orientation, in the religious ideology. The Houthis have a messianic vision. And that's something they share with other Islamist groups, Shia, Sunni. Almost all Islamist groups believe in that at the end of times, a figure will emerge from Yemen, and he will march armies from Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, and take over the holy sites of Mecca and Medina in nowadays Saudi Arabia, and then march his armies towards Jerusalem, capture Jerusalem, and there kill the Antichrist and establish an Islamic government based in Jerusalem with a global mandate. So the Houthis are driven by this vision, which is a promised, the promised, they call it a promised conquest and holy jihad, which is what the Houthis call or name their attacks. But anyway, so they see this whole thing, attacks in the Red Sea, conflict with the West, conflict with the Saudis, conflict with the Yemeni government. They see this struggle as part of a large ordained battle against perceived enemies of Islam. So when they say they support Gaza, yes, they do support Gaza, but it's in the bigger picture, their aim is to destroy Israel and establish the Islamic government based in Jerusalem. And they view themselves as the champions and defenders of the Muslim nation. And some even believe that Abdul Malik al-Houthi himself is this figure. The figure's name is Mahdi. So they're driven by extreme religious ideology. And according to that ideology, there would be a lot of loss, but it's for the greater good.
Wow. It's always a pleasure to get actual answers to these questions. So thank you very much. Indeed, ideology seems to be shaping decision-making left, right, and center then for the Houthis. This brings us to Iran, who's featured heavily in most accounts of Yemen's civil war. And I've spent a bit of time myself researching this, and Iran's involvement has sort of, or is surrounded by quite a sort of a vast mythology here. So I'd like us to zoom into Iran's role. Nadwa, and then we're going to turn to Guled. Nadwa, what is the nature of Iran's relationship with the Houthis, and how has it evolved since the start of the relationship?
Yes, Iran, excuse me, Iran has been the Houthis' sponsor since the movement inception, since its early stages. The Houthi leader, the founder of the rebellion, Hussein al-Houthi, who started the fighting against the government in 2004 and was killed in the same year. And his father, who was a Zaidi scholar, and also the current leader of the movement, they all spent time in studying in Iran. Hundreds of Houthi members and leaders studied in Iran since the 1990s and early 2000s. So it goes a long way back. Iran has supported the Houthis since even before the Yemeni civil war broke out in 2014. There are evidence that IRGC and Hezbollah commanders were present in Yemen before then, and that includes Abu Raza Shahlai, who is the Quds Force commander, was sanctioned by the US in 2008 for aiding terror groups in Iraq. There's also some documents that indicate that Hezbollah commanders have trained the Houthis on urban warfare in Sada in the north in 2005. So Iran has been present in Yemen before the war, unlike the perception that it just came after the war. But Iran's support to the Houthis increased dramatically, significantly during this war. And that's because the Houthis now control the capital and then control territory and control seaports and control the airport. So since then, Iran supported the Houthis with advanced weapons, including ballistic missiles and drones. They helped them develop weapon manufacturing capabilities, which allow them to sustain operations. They provided them with military expertise, with IRGC and Hezbollah and even Iraqi experts on the ground, helping the Houthis managing military operations and assisting in cross-border attacks and maritime attacks. Iran also helped the Houthis develop their information warfare capability, which is very effective compared to every other player in Yemen and probably the region. It helped them establish a police state in the country where they controlled the population and social and focused on militarizing and indoctrination. Also very important, Iran has helped the Houthis develop a revenue stream from illicit trade and smuggling network, and now is helping the Houthis expand influence and operations in the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa, including Somalia, which Guled will be talking about.
Thank you very much indeed. I think your answer already touches on some of the themes that we're going to be discussing shortly. Just on the question of sort of Iran's relationship with the Houthis, Khaled, are there discrepancies in interests? And if so, what are the implications of these discrepancies between what Iran wants and what the Houthi want?
Yeah, thanks. So the relationship between Iran and Houthis, as Nadwa mentioned, started way back. Since 2000, let's say 2004, 2014. Initially, it was probably helping them, supporting them, and to become more powerful to overrun the Yemeni forces. But then I think Iran ultimate goal is to have a geopolitical dominance and power in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden and Indian Ocean. And the best partner they could find is the Houthis. So Iran has a lot of connection with for example, Al-Shabaab, where they provide them, assist them in illegal mining of uranium in one of the Somalia Galmudug region, and also illegal fishing in Puntland region, where they work with the pirates. So for Houthis to receive some assistance from Iran, for example, the illegal oils from Iraq and Iran, weapons, they need facilitators, and those are Al-Shabaab, the pirates, and that's where Iran uses those networks to assist the Houthis. So the initially Houthis, we could say that they were a proxy of Iran, but now they transition as a partner since the October 7 attack and the Gaza war started. They are now projecting themselves as a global, Islamist leader geopolitically in the Red Sea and also the Gulf countries and globally. And so this is where, there's a misunderstanding that Houthis are the proxies, but in reality they are partner. The Houthis feel that they are not the proxies of Iran, but partner with Iran. And so they are potentially competing with them. And now, as you can see, Houthis with the access to advanced weapons and resources, they are now exporting Houthis, terrorists to Russia in Ukraine war, Syria. For example, in Syria, they send Al-Shabaab terrorists to Syria to participate in the Gaza war. So all of those connections, Iran facilitates. So Iran, the epicenter of Houthis, but they are partners at the same time.
Most interesting. I mean, having spent some time myself researching proxy conflicts, I think one of the most difficult line to draw is this between sort of partners and proxies and allies. And I'm glad you clarified that for us and the audience. And I think the point that you're making about the broader networks is very important, because we tend to think of these sort of partners or sort of proxies as just a simple, sort of principal agent kind of relationship, but they sit in broader networks, and that makes me sort of push the discussion a bit further. So, Khaled, in addition to helping advance Iran's interests vis-a-vis Israel by participating in the October 7th war, what specific interests do the Houthis have in targeting Israel and attempting to shut down the Red Sea? And I was wondering if we can sort of zoom in a bit in the illicit trade aspect of this, which I think is often left behind or outside of the conversation.
Absolutely. No, this is very important. So just to take back in 2024. And early 2023, November, I broke the story that the Houthis and Al-Shabaab were establishing a relationship through illicit trade. For example, the Houthis will bring Iran illegal fuel to the Al-Shabaab and in Somalia, and weapons. And in exchange, the Houthis also were getting access to, for example, livestock export from Somalia, illegal rare earth mining from Somalia. So, and then it transcended also the involvement of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which the story was broke in the VOA, which I reported back in early 2024, where Houthis actually send engineers, Iranian and some Iraqis, to Al-Shabaab remote area in the southern Somalia, where they assist them building drones, short missiles, and medium range missiles. And this is where the Houthis are really getting into Somalia deeper now than ever before. So there's a Houthi illicit trader network called Al Jamal Network, which has been sanctioned by the U.S. government and the Emiratis and the Saudis. And this network runs about a GDP close to $4 billion of smuggling weapons, fishing, drug trafficking, you name it, all kind of illicit trades that you can think of. And basically, they facilitate the ransom of the shipping. For example, as you know, the Houthis earn, according to UN report, $180 million per month. And they split that with the Al-Shabaab and the pirates in the Puntland area. And when you calculate the sum of that is close to $2 billion. So Al-Shabaab gets about 20% based military intelligence. We've got the information. So this network also expands into bringing illegal fuel from Iraq as well too. And also money laundering is another case which they facilitate through Djibouti, Amman, and Turkey. So this vast network is well connected and started facilitated by Iran. But the Houthis are now building their own network of proxy of that run illicit trade, livestock from Somalia, illegal mining from Somalia, and also the facilitating of illegal fuel from Iran and Iraq and weapons through Djibouti, and also from Russia using the food import from Ukraine occupied area as well too.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, by all means,
so
please.
Another important thing that the Houthis have been doing is they've recruited soldiers or recruits from several African countries, including Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, and I think also Eritrea. And they've been training them in secret camps, military camps in North Yemen. And then they send them back to these countries to become Houthi spies. So they're building their network of influencers inside these countries, and they're doing that slowly and steadily until sometime they want to collaborate with with not only with Al-Shabaab and Somali pirates, but potentially rebel groups, armed groups in that region.
I was listening to both of you talk, and I was making extensive notes. What a vast enterprise. And I think it's important to zoom into this because it is often something that most analyses sort of leave out of the picture. So we have illicit trade, and we have foreign fighters, and we have money laundering, quite a lot to cover, which I think is important to consider precisely when thinking about sort of deterrence and sort of counter strategies, and these aspects should be part of the conversation. So I'm very glad to see you bring this up. I would like to sort of shift the conversation to questions of strategy and military capabilities, and to follow up on what you both said. So as we know, on November sort of 19th to 2023, if I remember correctly, the Houthis sort of boarded a commercial ship and subsequently began targeting shipping vessels bound for Israel with missiles and drones, sort of inaugurating a campaign of economic interdiction in the Red Sea. Khaled, what has been the specific nature of Houthi military activities in the Red Sea sort of since late 2023? And I'll follow up with a question for Nadwa on the same topic. But Khaled, you first.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the military capability and how it get there. The Houthis' military capability is keep on advancing with the as I said, Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps who are assisting them, providing them this the know-how. And I've looked at the reports from the UN as well, done investigation. Houthis' military capability is advancing by getting support from North Korea. For example, they send training some of their soldiers to North Korea, and also with they provide the help to Al-Shabaab as well too. So they get advanced training in the sea, maritime. This is why they recently developed their own automatic auto boats that can carry heavy bombs that can blow up the ships. This is very advanced and very high speed level. And also they are testing more missiles that can reach beyond in Indian Ocean area. For example, what they like to see is they don't want to limit themselves in the in the Red Sea area. Ultimately, what they want to get extortion and ransom in the Indian Ocean. So they are bringing some advanced weapons to Somalia with Al-Shabaab. And one of the intelligence we've got and confirmed by the UN reports is that they're sending short and medium modern missiles to Al-Shabaab in the Indian Ocean area that can reach up to 40 kilometers. And eventually that will increase. So that's one part. But this military capability wouldn't be possible without sucking the Yemen economy. As you know, Yemen GDP was around $1,400 per capita. Today is $430, which is below Somalia GDP per capita. Houthis GDP is close to $6 billion. And also they control the illicit, not only but the legal trade of the Yemen, of all the ports, pretty much 3 of the ports they control. That will finance their military capability to buy weapons, advanced weapons from China, North Korea, Russia, and this is keep on increasing. And as we can see the situation going on.
Khaled, if I could just sort of follow up on what you just said, so the 2 questions in sort of quick succession. How dependent are the Houthis on sort of Iran and North Korea and external partners for resourcing the military? And I guess linked to this, do the Houthis have they demonstrated capacity for indigenous military production?
Very good question. To separate, first of all, they really depend on Iran in terms of technology advancement and capability. Houthis mostly, I don't think they have the local manufacturing indigenous, but what they do is customization and modernization capability, not indigenous manufacturing. Actually, they need the raw material from North Korea, China, and Iran. For the bombs, for example, the electric detonators for the missiles they got from China and North Korea, facilitated by Djibouti. So they don't have the local indigenous. But for and Iran, what they provide, which is something very important, a lot of people not paying attention, is intelligence. Basically, providing where the ships are tracking system and also the radar system. I think some of the things they are acquiring from Russia is the intelligence of acquiring the radar, where they can know when the drone is coming and how fast it's coming, and the missiles and these things. So those are the things they are. So more they are dependent on Russia, China, and the North Korea and Iran. They heavily dependent on them. Because they don't have the capability to build a lot, but they do modernization and customization, and in terms of getting access from these advanced weapons, they keep increasing. Maybe they might reach at the point that they might build themselves if they have got the space, but they do outsource. For example, sending 5 engineers to Al-Shabaab to build small drones, which is something they advance.
Wow. Okay. Nadwa, if still on the question of sort of strategy and military capabilities, I was wondering if we can sort of talk a bit about the bigger picture. So what have the economic and political implications been for the region and more broadly the world when we think about such capabilities of this sort of armed non-state actor?
I'd like to add one thing about weapons. When the Houthis took the capital city of Sana'a and expanded throughout Yemen, they've captured military bases and government weapon depots, including probably a lot of the weapons that the U.S. provided the Yemeni government before to counter terrorism. So they did inherit state weapon capabilities weapons before they got more weapons from Iran. So that's very important to mention. In terms of the economic, I mean, the disruption in the Red Sea has caused a lot of economic consequences in the region. One notable consequence is Egypt. Egypt has lost $7 billion over the past year as a result of the Red Sea attacks. Other ports in the region have been impacted. Gulit can probably talk more about this. He probably has more numbers than I do. So I'll just bounce the question to him.
Yeah. So if I just carry on, the economic impact is huge. Let's start with Bab al-Mandam and the Gulf of Aden. This is where 12% of the global commercial goes through, and 30% of the EU energy goes through. So you can understand how that has been disrupted. And Egypt, as Nadwa put it rightly, they lost a significant revenue. So 60% of the Suez Canal revenue has been gone. Another area a lot of people are not being, and I've been studying a lot, is the Saudi, how the Saudi, which is a small part, but significantly impacted. For example, the Saudi Jeddah port, the commercial goods was about, export was about $700 million per year. Today is about $400 million. So that's a quite significant number, but it's very small when you compare the domestic revenue of Saudi and the GDP overall. But it has an impact on the Saudi, disrupting the Saudi export and import, whether it's the oil, whether it's the commodity and the goods and whatnot. So that's one thing, people. But on the other side, also, it disrupted the other countries in African region mostly. That is not, who have been coming out the pandemic crisis, and now the Russian sanctions, in addition to the Red Sea crisis. A lot of the sub-Saharan African and are going through these crises of managing this inflation and all that, and the shipping prices increase. But at the same time, people need to understand also this also has impacted China, because the shortest route is for them is to go to the Red Sea for Europe and all that. But the Houthis are facilitating them, giving a special arrangement for Russia and China. But sometimes the risk is out there, and most of the shippers. But then there are it's one thing to talk about the economic impact of the overall, but then there are beneficiaries, which I think we need to talk about it. For example, a lot of the shipping companies, their profit went up. In fact, some of the shipping companies. Countries like Djibouti benefited from these crises. Actually, their port manager came out and said, this was the best thing happened to us, to the point that the Djibouti port was overcrowded with so many containers coming from all over the countries that was going to the Red Sea, because now the capacity was short, and that has impacted their port rating, which now Somaliland, which has a new port built by DP World by the UAE, became number one in Africa, which wasn't good for them. So there are beneficiaries, folks, and then overall in economic, but there are countries who benefit and actors who benefit from these crises as well, too.
Very interesting. So this extraordinary disruption was met with a host of responses, right, by an entire sort of coalition of countries. So here's a question for both of you. How have the Americans and Israeli and sort of broader international community responded to both the Houthi attacks against Israel and in the Red Sea? And how can they optimize their reactions going forward?
I can take that question. So the US and the international community responded by reacting, as usual, to what the Houthis are doing. So under the Biden administration, the US carried airstrikes, but the airstrikes were largely defensive, and they were conservative, with the purpose of degrading the Houthis' capabilities and kind of preventing them from attacking ships. Under the Trump administration, these airstrikes became more extensive, more aggressive, and while under Biden, they seek to contain the Houthis, I think under President Trump, the airstrikes seek to disrupt the Houthis, including targeting Houthis leadership, which is a major shift. Trump the other day tweeted that the Houthis will be completely annihilated. That's the objective. So while under President Biden, the purpose was to end their strikes and then kind of push the Houthis back into the political process in Yemen. Israel focused more on targeting infrastructure, so seaports, power plants, things like that. And so, these airstrikes might help degrade the Houthis' capabilities, but then I don't think that they will yield results long term because of different reasons. One, all the Houthis have to do is survive the airstrikes. The US cannot continue these airstrikes indefinitely. I think it's important that they degrade the Houthis' capabilities, but the Houthis can always replenish their stockpile of weapons. They still control seaports. They control the north. They control the majority of the population, and that's very, very important. Just to give one example, last year, while the U.S. airstrikes were ongoing, the Houthis managed to get 15 ships from Iran. 15 ships sailed from Bandar Abbas seaport in Iran into Hodeidah and Al Salif seaport under Houthi control, and they came from Iran. So I don't think they were carrying development aid. So they can still. This is an area that is so vast. The smuggling networks. The interdiction has been happening, but for every one ship that's interdicted by the U.S., so many ships and so many boats pass through and detected. And so, without controlling the incoming weapon shipments, illegal incoming shipments, it's very hard to sustain this. Like I said, the Houthis still control land, and someday the airstrikes will stop, and then the Houthis will continue to get weapons and even more later. But I think the more important issue here is that we cannot look at this in isolation from the situation in Yemen. The Houthis control the majority of the population. They're focused on militarizing. They're focused on indoctrinating, especially younger people. Last year, they indoctrinated or they enrolled 1.1 million boys and girls into their summer camps, where they basically are taught the Houthis' ideology in isolation from their families, weeks at a time, months at a time. So they're focused on building their jihadist army. And so as long as they control territory, as long as they control the majority of the population, they can always survive and adapt. And they have survived and adapted in the past. And they will live to fight another day. In 2004, their leader was killed by the Yemeni government. It didn't set the group back. It only made them more determined. And they have evolved ever since. We've seen how they've evolved over the past 10 years, regardless of the Saudi and Emirati airstrikes, and now regardless of Biden airstrikes last year. And so I think focusing on only airstrikes is not going to achieve what we want, which is, ending the Houthi threat once and for all. So in order for the US government to achieve long-term sustainable results in Yemen, they need to work with the Yemeni government. They need to support Yemeni government forces and coordinate with the Saudis and the Emiratis to defeat the Houthis militarily on the ground. And we don't need US boots on the ground. We just need the US to support, to back, to provide weapons and training and expertise. This is the only way.
Thank you, Nada. Such clear analysis, both of shortcomings of previous and ongoing sort of response strategies, but then also a clear outline of perhaps what should be done. And I think that's very important, because I've read a lot of analyses that sort of very quickly conclude that the Houthis are somehow undeterrable or not to be stopped. So it's good to sort of think that if we,
I'm sorry, that's just a myth.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it's good that we're sort of going straight to the crux of the problem with our conversation. If you both had to forecast, what does the future have in store for the Houthis, especially when accounting for the severe degrading of the relationship between Iran and the other proxies, if we think of sort of Hezbollah for that matter? And perhaps additionally, will sort of Iran attempt to shift greater resources and attention to the Gulf of Aden, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean?
Yeah, if I might jump on this one.
Sure.
The talking about the future, right? So we talk about degradation of the Iran and other proxies, and then how the Houthis that will impact. In reality, degrading militarily alone is not going to work. As you can see now, and this is somebody who's been studying on Al-Shabaab, how the U.S. have been targeting Al-Shabaab for the last, say since 2006 to date. Degradation doesn't work alone. So, these proxies and terrorists, mostly they have income. So they have wealth. So they have money laundering, illicit activities, extortion. So those things will go on. You might, if you kill their leader, for example, Hezbollah leader killed, there will be another one coming. But then they have networks and state actors, not only proxies, but the state actors networks. Countries with shipping companies that facilitate their illicit activities. All of them, in fact, if you compare Biden administration to Trump, just for the last 25 days, he's done more than I'll say Biden in terms of sanctioning. For example, the sanctioning of the fleet, dark fleet ships and whatnot. But going back to the Iran influence, so Iran ultimate game is right now they have control in the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, Red Seas through and the Gulf of Aden through the pirates and the Houthis. Their ultimate goal is to control also in the Indian Ocean through Al-Shabaab. Recently, I've written a study about the Iran who is acquiring and merging ISIS and Al-Shabaab there was a meeting that happened back in October between Al-Shabaab and ISIS, and the goal of Iran wanted was to merge these two groups, because the Al-Shabaab elements, the ISIS elements in Somalia, in the Puntland region, was originally from Al-Shabaab. So what they want is to put them in one team, as become Islamic Caliphate, kind of like Houthi ones, and help them in capturing the Indian Ocean. That's their ultimate goal. And there are reports that also Iran is training some Afar tribes that live in Ethiopia borders, Djibouti and Eritrea. So you can see, because Iran lost, operations have been disrupted in Lebanon when Israel targeted the Hezbollah leader, and also Syria, Assad fall. Now they are shifting towards Horn Africa, which is very complex. You have Ethiopia, which have some instability in some regions. Then in Djibouti, you have also leadership transition, which Houthis also are partnered with them. And then you have Eritrea, which also have some instability. And then you have Somalia, and both of them. So Iran's ultimate goal is to something that the Persian Empire never achieved before. When you have a control of global choke points in the Persian Gulf, the Bab el-Mandeb, and Indian Ocean, we're talking about an economy that's $9 trillion. When you talk about the financial cables that go under the sea, the shipping routes and all that. And so this is their ultimate goal, with a partnership with China and Russia in the future. So this is something people are not paying attention. And this is where they are trying to merge ISIS and Al-Shabaab with Houthis. Is going to be a global dominance forces that if we don't take care of Houthis in Yemen with helping the Yemenis, and the way, and it's not only military and airstrikes, but we need a blockade in the Gulf of Aden and also the Red Sea. So the Houthis don't have access to ports or direct ports through Iran and whatnot. So that's my take.
Yeah. So Yemen, Houthi-controlled Yemen is already becoming the center of gravity for the axis of resistance. The other day, the former Iraqi prime minister who has close ties to Iran arrived in Sana'a to attend a conference on Palestine. Also, there was a report that just came out in the foreign policy that said that the Hezbollah and Iraqi operatives who were in Syria have now relocated to Yemen over the past few months. And so, yes, Iran will shift all its support to the Houthis because they are the proxy with the most potential, given the Horn of Africa as well. And so that's one scenario. And if that works for the Houthis and Iran, the region will be extremely destabilized, and instability is the environment where Iran manages to infiltrate countries and create proxies. And so then, but the other scenario is we work with the Yemeni government, we support Yemeni government forces to defeat the Houthis, and that will prevent all of this from happening. It depends on where the US government goes after the airstrikes.
Can I add just one little bit on this one? This is just mine. So lately, the U.S. Defense Secretary Peter said that as long the Houthis are not attacking the ships and not disrupting the free navigation in the Red Sea, we have no problem whatever they do in Yemen. I think that's kind of a little bit, I'll be very cautious, because the Houthis are gaining this strength and all that by exploiting the Yemenis' governance and getting that geopolitical dominance in the world. So they might not attack today. They might not disrupt the Red Sea. They can shift and take over Yemen. So I think as long Iran is also helping them and we are allowing them, we cannot allow them to take over the Yemen, and Iranis are helping them. But as long as they are giving up on not attacking Red Sea and or Israel. I think that's a dangerous precedent if we go that route. And I think we should really rethink about how we approach that. And that just want to add that part.
No, thank you very much. It's a great addition. And I wanted to sort of round up our conversation by introducing two more actors, if anyone was sort of missing already from the picture. So I wanted to hear your thoughts, both of your thoughts on sort of Russia and China in the picture. So the Russians have been flexing greater power and influence in the Red Sea region, and sort of as indicated by their prospective naval basing agreements with Sudan and Eritrea, and sort of while China too has been expanding its own presence with increased naval visits to the Red Sea. So given amplified Chinese and Russian involvement in the region, how are the Houthis and sort of in a way, again, by extension, Iran, interfacing with their Chinese and Russian partners?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's been reports that Russia is providing the Houthis with data to target ships, and that Russian operatives are advising the Houthis on the ground in Yemen. And China, I mean, and also Gulid mentioned earlier that the Houthis are sending fighters to Russia. China buys 90% of Iran's oil, which half of that goes to the IRGC, which that's indirect support to the Houthis. And there's been reports that Houthis use Chinese-made components to target ships in exchange for immunity for Chinese ships. But also, in 2003, the Chinese Enton oilfield group signed an economic agreement with the Houthis in 2003, which was terminated shortly after requested based on a request from the Yemeni government. We don't know the extent to which these countries are actually helping the Houthis. There are some indicators, but at the same time, this is an opportunity for Russia and China to expand influence in the Red Sea region, and also to undermine U.S. Interests there.
So just to add to that one, so it's important to focus on Russia. I'll talk about it in a bit, but I think there are more than a couple actors. Russia and China are, global stage, yes. But then you see the epicenter is Iran, and there are contributors, so, and then facilitators. So Iran is like the GoFund account, and China and Russia as the contributors for these illicit activities and whatnot. And then there are countries who facilitate these illicit activities, which is very important and people not paying attention. And there are three countries, I'll say, but there, if I prioritize one to two, three. Number one is Djibouti, and this is how it happened. Djibouti, what I call them the devil in the Bab al-Mandab. All the ships that go to Houthis come to Djibouti first. They are unchecked. They're allowed. The Iranian spy ships come to Djibouti. The Chinese goods come to Djibouti before they go to Houthis. So Djibouti facilitate a lot of the illicit and terrorism financing for the Houthis. And Oman, the same thing. Almost 20 to 30% of that happens on the ground, through the land, from the Arabian Sea. So that's one part. But China, yes, China does not want to. Before, as Nadwash mentioned, 90% of the Iran oil goes to China. Before, it used to be. They used to have these dark fleets. They used to go to Red Sea and exchange the oil and ship it up, and that's how they were doing. But now China demanded the Iranians direct fleets to come all the way to Malaysia, Singapore area, and that's where they do their illicit activities, because that area is less attention has been paid because there's more attention in the Red Sea area. Russia, yes, you're right. There was Navy visits in Eritrea and Sudan. Russia acquired two port access for the Sudan, which the previous regime gave them, but they refused lately. In Eritrea, they have already logistic support. Russia is trying to make Red Sea red again. It's been almost since Cold War they left. So now they are coming back to make Red Sea red again. And the way they'll do is that working with the Houthis and these failed states and whether it's Sudan or countries like regimes like Eritrea, to establish dominance. And Houthis, despite providing one of the things they are doing now, they are shipping illicit illegal food from the illegally occupied Ukrainian Crimea region to Houthis. Now those ships are coming Djibouti and then sent back to violating the UN verification system and going to the Houthi areas. And this has been happening lately a lot. And basically some of that shipping is not a food aid, though it's illegally imported from the Ukrainian side, but they are carrying advanced weapon missiles and drones and guns. So this is also another thing that has not been paid attention. Yeah.
Very, very interesting, and hopefully no one puts the slogan of "Let's make the Red Sea red again" on a hat. But your final answer allows us to sort of go into sort of the one question that we got in the chat, which I think follows from what you just said. So Joe through LinkedIn, I see, asked whether you see any opportunities in a counter-threat finance approach to neutralize the Houthis, any interface with formal financial structures.
Yeah, actually, that's a very important question. Trump have taken a really concrete step by placing first, number one, to the Houthis on the foreign terrorist organization, which Biden has not done that. Immediate had impact on this one. As you know, Saudi government already providing 500 million to the Yemen recognized government, but most of that money goes to the Sana'a Central Bank of Yemen in Sana'a. So it doesn't go to Central Bank in Aden. So now that money won't be able to go to Sana'a. Now it goes to the Central Bank of Yemen. A lot of the Yemeni, because of the placing the Houthis in the FTO, a lot of the Yemenis, banks, exchange, and the business now are shifting their business to Aden. But unfortunately, the Yemeni government have issued a statement which they're not seems to be more supportive on that one. But what I mean by that is, for example, they say if we don't want to disrupt you, so just bring your business. But what they need to do is, number one, they need to ask KYC, know your customer, right? So if you are doing business with the Houthis, you should provide we don't want to account you holdable, but you should provide the data. What have you allowing them, how you are, laundering their money, how do you are facilitating, which is fine. So you'll start from fresh here. So now the Houthis will lose a lot of the business. So for example, the Djiboutian banks cannot facilitate money to the central bank in Sana'a. Same thing in Oman. The Chinese cannot do direct business. The Russian cannot do business. This is a huge step. So that's one part. But I think also targeting the ships, the companies, for example, the cable companies who facilitate, the ransom companies who pay, all of that needs to be targeted as well.
Nadwa, would you like to come in with some thoughts on the question, or maybe some concluding observations on where should we go next?
Some concluding remarks to this conversation?
Or how to sort of think perhaps of the Houthi threat as we...
I don't have anything to add to what Gulit said in terms of, countering Houthi finances. But I'll say something at the end of what I would like everybody to leave this conversation with. Can I go now?
The floor. Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay. Right. Okay. So, whether the Houthis are Iran proxy or not Iran proxy, I mean, there's a lot of debate how much control Iran has on the Houthis. There is debate. But there is two important things. Iran and the Houthis are ideologically aligned, at least for the time being, at least for a long time to come. At the same time, they have they're well coordinated. They're focused right now. They're focused on creating enough disruption in order to expand into the Horn of Africa. I remember one thing when the Houthis, when they started expanding beyond the capital city of Sana'a, that was in 2011 and 12. And we didn't think that they would take the capital. They took the capital in 2014. We didn't think they would stay for long. Well, 10 years later, right? In 2016, the Houthis flaunted their drones and missiles on TV, and we Yemenis ridiculed them. Then a few years later, they bombed Saudi. Over a few years, they bombed Saudi with, they struck Saudi with 1,000 ballistic missiles and 350 drones. And then a few years later, they started attacking ships in the Red Sea. So this is a group that keeps progressing regardless of Iran's influence. And so it's about time to take the Houthis seriously, and enough with underestimating them. Like, this whole notion that the Houthis are undefeatable is just, it's entirely not accurate. But what I want people to leave with is, airstrikes, no airstrikes, sanctions, these are all, good tools. But as long as the Houthis control territory, as long as they control the population, then they'll survive all of this, and they will come back stronger and with vengeance. And so what needs to happen is, which haven't happened before, is to work with the Yemeni allies, the Yemeni government, to defeat the Houthis militarily. Only then the region will be safe. And if that doesn't happen, God help us.
Okay. Nadwa, Guled, thank you very much. I see someone in the chat told us, great show. I agree. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us, and for everyone else. Stay tuned for more content from the Proxies and Partners Special Project, but then also from the Irregular Warfare Initiative more broadly. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.